All right, welcome to our first R tutorial of the semester. So we're going to start with making sure that you have RStudio installed on the computer that you're using. You can download RStudio for free on your personal desktop, your laptop, your lab computer, and you can also use RStudio on these computers here in lab or the computers in the ACES library. So RStudio is just a really nice user interface for R, and it's going to make it easy to learn how to code. So let's open up RStudio. And this is what you would see if you were opening up RStudio for the first time. We have our console here, which is where our code is going to spit out. And then we have our environment and our history tabs. You'll see in a second that when we name a variable or a data set, it's going to pop up here in our environment. Then down here, we have a couple different tabs. The one that we're really going to use today is the plots tab. So anytime we make a graph, it's going to come up here in this tab. And then also useful to note that in this help tab, you can search anything you want in R and get resources on how to learn more about it. Let's go back to our plots tab because that's what we're going to be using today. So the fun thing about R is that it has this, or RStudio is that it has this script window over here. So we'll open up a new R script and we will just start seeing what R can do. So the first thing is we can start with just really simple math, just like a calculator would do, just to give you an idea of where things will pop up. So we'll say 7 plus 8, we want to do that calculation, we highlight it, we click run, and down here in the console we can see what we ran, 7 plus 8, that was our code in blue, and then our output in black, 15. So now let's name a variable. Let's name the variable x, and we will use this arrow to point to x, and anytime you see an arrow like this, it's just going to be denoting that we are naming something. So we're assigning a number to the variable x, and let's say it is 16. So in order to assign it officially, we highlight it and click run. And down here you can see we didn't do any calculation, we just assigned 16 to the variable x. But up here in our environment, you can see that our value x is 16. So now let's say we wanted to do a simple calculation, x plus 8, we highlight it, we click run, and we can see that x plus 8 in this case, based on what the computer knows over here in its environment, is 24. So this is a pretty simple demonstration of what we're looking for here in R. Now let's just get started with our histogram and our box plot. So we can just delete this in the script window. And we can start with naming our data set. So we already have a data set from Compass, and it's called Lab 1 Data CSV. So let's open it up and see what we have. So CSV is just a really simple version of Excel, and I'll show you in a subsequent tutorial how to switch back and forth between CSV and Excel, but just know that it's really simple. It's just makes it easy for R to read the data. So we have our year going all the way back to 1966, the presidential party, Democrat or Republican, the presidential approval, and this is a percentage. So we have numbers 1 to 100 centering around about 50, as you can see here. And then we have seat change. So adding seats for that presidential party would be positive, and losing seats to the other party would be negative. You can see here that this NA is just representing that we are missing that data point for whatever reason. Maybe a fire, we lost this data way back in 1966, so who knows, maybe just bad record keeping. So this is our data set that we're going to work with, and the first thing that we need to do is we need to tell R where to look for this data set. So we're going to go to Session, and we're going to say set working directory. And our working directory is just where we're going to work from, where we're going to pull our file from. And we're going to choose the directory. And since our file is on the desktop, we're just going to choose desktop. And you can see here, that's our file that we're going to use. So do we just say open? Now, we didn't type anything up in this code window, but we can see down here, the console is showing us that we set our working directory to the desktop. So now, we're going to take our first function, and we're going to say, we're going to name our data set. So we'll just call it pres data with a capital P and a capital D. So be careful because R is case sensitive. And we're just going to say, first function, read.csv. So we're telling the computer that we're going to read this CSV file, and that is going to make up our new data set called presidential data. So we'll put in quotes what file name we want. So lab1data.csv, and that'll tell it to read this file. And then the only other thing we're going to say is header equals true. So what does that mean? That means that in this file, these header labels correspond to these numbers below. So this presidential approval header corresponds to all of these numbers down here. So let's highlight this and click run. And you'll see that over here in our global environment, we have a data set called pres data, what we just named it. So double clicking on that, we can see in this second tab in our script window that this is exactly what we saw in our Excel file. So now R knows what to pull from regarding this data set. So now let's make a histogram using these data. So the function that we're going to use is just HIST, histogram. And first we're going to tell the system to pull from the pres data dataset. A $sign indicates what variable we're going to use. So from the pres data dataset, we're going to use the presidential approval variable. And we are going to add some constraints about what, where to start with our histogram. So our breaks are going to be starting at 40, ending at 70, and every 5. So our bins are going to go by every 5 percentage points for presidential approval. So let's highlight this. Oops. And click run. And over here in our plots tab, like I said, we have our plot pop up. So here's our histogram. We're starting at 40 and ending at 70, and our breaks are at every 5. However, these titles don't look really great. Let's rename our axes. These are just the default ones. So let's go back into our line of code, and we'll make our main title presidential approval. Our X label or X lab is going to be approval rating, and we put this in quotes. And then our Y label is going to be frequency. And this is what it already is, but we can code it in. We could change it and make it whatever we wanted. So those are our axis labels. Let's highlight this again and click run. And you can see over here on our plot, our labels have changed to something much, much nicer. So now that's good enough for our homework, but let's get one more fun thing in. If we go back into our line of code and we put a comma and we hit color, we can type in a color. I like magenta. Hit run, and change the color of our bars in our histogram to whatever we wanted. So we can make it green, yellow, whatever you want. So that's just kind of fun, an extra thing that we can do. Great. So now that we have our histogram, let's say we wanted to copy it into our homework. So we'll pull up our Word document. This would be our homework assignment. And if you're asked to make a histogram, you can come over here and click export. You can save this as an image or a PDF, but I like to just copy it to the clipboard. Copy plot, paste, and there you have it in your Word document. So we won't save this, but this is how you would put your plot into your homework. Now, we made our histogram. Now let's make our box plot. So we'll do this using the function boxplot. And we'll start by telling the system what data set to use, like we did before. So we're using presidential data and a $sign to indicate the variable, and we're going to use seat change. So we're not going to use our presidential approval data like we did for our histogram. This time we're going to use the seat change data. Now, that is going to be our y-axis. Our x-axis, denoted by this little wiggle, is going to be from the presidential data set, but the variable is going to be presidential party. So we're going to have two box plots separated into Democrat and Republican. So now, let's highlight this and run it. And we see over here that we have our very simple box plot. Now, we're going to need some labels. So let's go back in and we'll make our labels just like we did before. Main equals seat change by party. Our X lab or X label is going to be party, and that needs to be in quotes. And our Y lab or Y label is going to be seat change. Again, these can be anything that you want. So let's highlight these and run it, and voila, we have some labels over here. Now, we can see that we have our median dark line here for our seat change data, but we're going to need to add a point for our means. So in order to do that, we need to calculate the means from each of the data sets. So we are naming these as means, we're pointing to it, and we're just going to tell the system that we calculate this by our presidential data set, our seat change variable, our presidential data set separated by presidential party. We're going to calculate the mean, and that missing data set we're going to remove. And that's all this means. Not applicable data, point, remove equals true. So when we're calculating our means, we're not going to worry about that missing data point. We highlight it, we click run, and we can see over here that under values, we have our means already calculated for us. So let's go now and take those mean values that we just calculated and actually put them as points using our points function on our box plot. So we're going to use our means that we just calculated, and PCH is just going to be the type of point that we're going to put on it. So it can be a dot, a plus sign, a square, whatever. We're just indicating which one we'd like to use. This is just for aesthetics. And then CEX is just going to be the size of our point, and we're going to use a fairly small point here, 0.075. So let's highlight this and run it. Watch over here to see our points pop up. And there you go. We now have plus signs where our means for each of these data sets would be. So that is all that we need to do for our box plot and our histogram. Now you know how to do those for your homework, and we will be learning some more stuff in R next time on our next tutorial. What you can do though is if you've got code that you like and you want to save, you can go up here and click Save, the little floppy disk under your R script window, and we'll just say Lab 1 R Tutorial. We'll save that, and then we can go back to it in the future. All right, good luck with your coding, and we will see you next week.